Well, good day and welcome again to Search for Signs. This is my second video I'm putting up today because I have some questions and some comments to cover in this video. My name is Gary Willing, and as always, I want to welcome you to Search for Signs. And if you didn't hear the other video I put up today, just a reminder to check out some of the links that I provided in the description portion of these videos so you can understand this information if you're coming upon it for the first time, or even if you want to know more about it and you've heard about it for years. Definitely check out some of the background the websites that I put up so you can get a lot of background information. Now, in the last video, I talked about the sort of cleavage again, based on a comment that Marie Harris had put up a few days ago. In this video, I am going to discuss what Rachel Joyner put up a couple days ago about the need to share. Now, first, I have to say, Rachel, if you're listening, I do want to thank you for putting this comment up. I know you don't necessarily agree with what I have to say, but I can tell that you at least took the time to listen to some of the video, whether all the video or not, but you listened to it enough to formulate an opinion versus just formulating an opinion based on a title, so I really do respect you for that. I do want to discuss what you talked about because I do think that your comment is worth addressing, because a lot of people have that same kind of view. And surprisingly, as much as I've been talking about sharing and the principle of sharing and how it's the only way to bring about the most important thing that we need to do, which is peace, create peace on the planet, and how necessary it is for the survival of the species on this planet, the human species on this planet. I haven't gotten a lot of people who have commented like this, but when I talk to people in my own life, they bring stuff like this up. Might not be exactly the same, but they bring it up a lot. So I'm glad you did. It'll give us something to talk about. Now, for those of us who are maybe hearing this information for the first time, according to Maitreya, the world teacher, the humanity must create peace first. The problems that are facing humanity are quite long, and they're getting longer by the day. But it's going to involve cooperation on some level, which cooperation on some level is goodwill, which is the lowest level of peace. Now, over time, peace is kind of like an art form. It will continue to grow and deepen and widen and become more fulfilled and so forth. But initially, goodwill is the first manifestation of peace. Now, Maitreya says, without sharing, there can be no justice. Without justice, there could be no peace. And without peace, there could be no future. That's what he says is the simple path to peace. Without peace, there could be no future. We don't really relate it to that. We think that peace is a forlorn hope that maybe possibly could happen one day. But according to the teacher, if we do not create peace, our future is not only in jeopardy, it's guaranteed to end. So we must look at how important that is and look at the path to peace, because I guess the question that I always like to bring up is what the nations of the world, especially nations like the United States that are very powerful and influential, their foreign policies that they've done over the past few decades, has it created peace or not? It hasn't. Sorry to answer that question right away and not give you time to think about it, but it's it's pretty obvious. We every year where there's more and more war, there's more and more effects of that lack of peace, whether it's political instability, ever-growing costs of these wars and so forth, bloodshed, violence, more terrorism, and those kind of things. That's what's going on based on what the countries around the world have been doing, but if you look at the principle of sharing, like the teacher talks about, okay, so this is where Rachel has an issue with what I was saying. So I always bring up the Marshall Plan as historical evidence that what Maitreya is saying is true. Because according to the masters, that was the only time that the principle of sharing ever took place. It's not exactly how it's going to look in the future, but it can give you a bit of an idea. Where the United States saw that they needed to help out Western Europe right after World War II and gave excesses of what they had freely to those nations to help rebuild those nations. Those nations then in turn gave back in payment what they initially took from their excesses later on. which created an economic boom in the United States and in Europe. But more importantly than the economic boom, the trust amongst the nations that participated in it. All the nations that are listed that have participated in the Marshall Plan, and you can go to Wikipedia and read it yourself, nations like Britain, the United States, Germany, France, Italy, Portugal, Spain, just to name a few. Those are the big ones, or more popular, names that would come to my mind that participated in the Marshall Plan, had at once been at war with one another. And even right before the Marshall Plan, it was just a few years that they were at war with one another during World War II. But since then, none of them have attacked one another. They've attacked other nations, but none of them have attacked the nations themselves. And so even that experiment of the Marshall Plan ended in the 50s, or late 40s, early 50s. Those nations have a goodwill relationship with one another, which is what we need globally to help solve problems like the environment and so forth, to help end terrorism and those kind of things. Now, getting to the comment. Rachel said, you must fix these corrupt governments in these, quote, poor countries before anyone should be sharing with them. Corruption only gets worse with more wealth. So stop preaching to more organized countries about giving things to corrupt countries. Fix the corruption first, because inherently man is not good. Man's nature is not to share. Well, again, Rachel, thank you for your opinion and thank you for your comment. And it will give us something to kind of talk about, and kind of hopefully we'll learn more about the principle of sharing in the process. So first of all, is it true that nations like the United States and the Western European nations are more organized and less corrupt than poorer nations? I mean, you just said yourself that the more wealth you get, the more corrupt you get, right? You just said it, right? Corruption only gets worse with more wealth. So the more organized nations that you're referring to are the G9 nations. They're the wealthiest nations, right? So wouldn't they be more corrupt based on what you just said? You know what I mean? Or I would say, it kind of goes along the lines of what I was saying in terms of the political scene here in the United States. Everyone's corrupt. The poor nations are corrupt, but the United States is just as corrupt as any banana republic, or maybe more based on what you said. The more wealth, the more corrupt you are, right? So I kind of agree with that statement. Should we fix the corruption? Yes, the corruption it actually is to some degree starting to work itself out. I talked about the sword of cleavage with Maitreya, being sent out, the love nature of Maitreya being sent out in great potency, and how it's affecting every one of us on this planet. It's making us more of who and what we are. It also is bringing corruption to the surface, whether it's group corruption, governmental corruption, or even individual corruption, making us more and more of who we are. Sometimes almost to where it's we can't control it. And not to throw my 2 cents in about what happened at the Oscars, but you look at somebody like Will Smith, who portrays himself as a decent person. He probably is a very decent person, good person, but yet he had this freak out, right? Well, it's that energy that's having that happen, because that type of violent reaction must have been in him some kind of way, and for it to come out in that way. So if you look at the other corruption that happens maybe within yourself or myself or whoever, it's bringing that up to the surface to where we have to deal with it. And sometimes it's uncontrollable, and celebrities, it's very easy to see because we know them and we're familiar with them, and we maybe perhaps have a view of who they are, which isn't real, right? But yet they might be also portraying that way of presenting themselves for their own benefit when they're not really like that. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? And so this energy brings it up to the surface to make it more seen. Governments are having to deal with corruption on an epic scale right now, but the corruption was always there. It's just bringing it to the surface. So we deal with it. It's painful. It's uncomfortable, but it's a part of the process. Now, the last two sentences that you said, fix the corruption first because inherently man is not good, man's nature is not to share. Maitreya would disagree with that statement. And he would say that the truth of the matter is actually that within the hearts of every single man, woman, and child on this planet is the same divine nature that's within them, that they're manifesting perfectly. that we're not manifesting perfectly yet. The only difference between them and us is they manifest that divinity perfectly moment to moment without exception. We manifest it from anywhere from almost perfect, you know what I'm saying, to hardly never, or always, hardly ever, and it's just, and everybody in between. But that divinity is within the hearts of all of us. And that divinity within the hearts of all of us, according to Maitreya, is longing for, wanting for, striving for unity, cooperation, peace, justice, the need to share willingly, and all that kind of stuff. It's within our hearts. Intellectually, we might not see it like that. And just because it's within the hearts of all of us, and just because that love nature of Maitreya when he's speaking to humanity in the way that he is on TV, even now, not being claimed to be Maitreya, according to the masters, is waking humanity up, waking it up to the truth that's latent within their own hearts. So he's not speaking a truth that's unfamiliar to us. He's speaking a truth that's very familiar to the inner nature of who we all are. That's the possibility. That's why the changes, even though they seem rather utopian or far-fetched, are very real and can very easily happen. It's because that divine truth that he's speaking about, that we're one, that we need to see each other as one, that we need to share so that that oneness can start to manifest. That truth is within the hearts of all of us, without exception. Even the most hardened, most violent, most bigoted members of humanity have that same latent divine truth within their hearts. The special gift that Maitreya has, being who he is, when he speaks, he doesn't speak like an average person would speak. He uses the same words, maybe, perhaps even more simple than an average person would, speaking a truth. But the energy and the love that's within his heart is immeasurable. You can't, it's like you've never seen that kind of love before. And that love penetrates the hearts of the listener, and it wakes them up. Again, they still might disagree with him. They still might be violently against what he says. But it's waking them up to the truth. And eventually they will see the same truth that he sees, that we are one, that we need to live as one. But the principle of sharing it, according to Maitreya, is the only way to manifest love on this planet, which is not an ideal. It's love amongst, goodwill, trust amongst nations. That's the beginning of it. And if you look at the Marshall Plan, historically, that's the case. So that's why I'm, quote unquote, preaching the sharing gospel. Not really preaching it, but just continuing to talk about it, because it's the most important thing that we need to do. So until we do institute the principle of sharing globally, it's something that we need to look at, we need to think about, we need to educate ourselves better about, because it's for each and every one of us to, talk about it, to help bring it about eventually. So hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully that, not that what I said didn't make sense, but, hopefully it's something that you might want to think about, because Maitreya will tell us that humanity has a choice to make, and it starts with the principle of sharing. There's no other way, actually, believe it or not. Now, sharing, again, let me just reiterate this before I end the video, is not individuals giving money to other individuals per se, okay? That in and of itself won't bring about peace. It has to be nation to nation. And it's more of nations' resources than money. And it could be anything, but also the masters would tell you that each nation has an excess, at least one excess to give to the common pool, and every nation has, needs that it needs from another nation. And so it would be a lot like the Marshall Plan, where, let's say, a country like the Philippines, that is more of an agricultural country, can give some of their food to other countries that need it, and then grab building materials or oil or whatever that they need in exchange for what they give to them. Will all nations participate in it right away? I don't know. I don't know how it's going to look. It might take some time for some nations. The United States might be one of the last nations to really participate in it. I don't know. But according to the masters, the best plan that will be the most effective, there'll be several plans that will be presented that humanity, when humanity starts to take seriously the advice of Maitreya that sharing is needed, they'll offer up some plans. Like, is this one the best one? Is this one, this one? And one of the plans, which the masters will tell them is the best, is that a department within the United Nations will be the overseer of this complex system of bartering known as the principle of sharing, headed up by one of these masters who's uncorruptible. You can't pay off a master. They don't have any desire to receive money for anything, or it seems kind of far-fetched, but they don't have any individual desire for themselves. They're only here helping to serve. And as we all start to serve, we'll start to have that same experience where we stop caring about the little self and concern ourselves more with the big self, which is humanity. But they're only concerned about the service of humanity. It has nothing to do with their individual self per se. So they can't be corrupted. So if a master was in charge of it, you couldn't pay him off or anything like this. Also, they don't have to take any bathroom breaks. They work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So you can get a lot of workload out of them. You know what I'm saying? And they can multitask like nobody's business. So that would be the best plan that humanity would, that the masters would say, yes, that's the best way to go about it. Other plans might be tried, and it might not work quite as well, but it will at least be the start of the principle of sharing. But that's the best plan. So anyway, hopefully that helps. But again, Rachel, thank you so much for your comment. It really did help, hopefully, all of us understand the principle of sharing better. Remember to take action and help SOP save our planet. Thanks for listening, and we look forward to talking to you again in future videos.